Good morning. I hope everybody had a great weekend. Thank you for adjusting to the virtual day on Friday and moving the 4-day to today. Personally, I hated having to reschedule our MLK Day of service, but it was the right call. Our hope will be that we can reschedule the day we had planned with various community organizations later in this school year. Our hope this year was to transform our remembrance of MLK Day with an actual speaker into a day of action, of service to the community all around us. This desire to move towards a day of true service learning pulls us closer to really what was the intended spirit of the national holiday and the sentiments shared by Dr. King. See, in 1994, Congress passed the King Holiday and Service Act, which transformed Martin Luther King Jr. Day into a day dedicated to volunteer service in honor of Dr. King's legacy. The day is a defining moment each year when Americans across the country step up to make our communities more equitable and to take action to create the beloved community of Dr. King's dream. While Dr. King believed the beloved community was possible and the fulfillment of the dream he mentioned in his speech at Washington, he acknowledged and fought for systematic change. His example is our call to action. Observed each year on the third Monday in January, MLK Day is the only federal holiday that's designated as a national day of service to encourage all Americans to volunteer to improve their communities. While we will not be able to conduct the full day today, we are fortunate to have an incredible message from our speaker who you will hear in just a moment. Kenneth Anderson is a graduate of Oakwood and Alabama A&M universities, where he earned degrees in psychology. He currently serves as the director of the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion for the city of Huntsville, working in the mayor's office. Prior to coming to work for the city, Mr. Anderson spent 16 years at Calhoun Community College, most recently as Dean of the Humanities and Social Sciences Division. Among his many community activities, Kenneth serves on several boards and has a membership in a number of community-based service organizations, including First Stop and 100 Black Men Greater Huntsville Chapter. Since 1990, he has been the host and producer of a live weekly radio talk show called Second Chance every Sunday on WJOU Praise 90.1 FM at 2 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time. He also does a podcast called Jazz with Kenny Anderson that can be heard on multiple streaming services. Kenneth is married to Sonia Tibbs Anderson, a contract officer, branch manager for the U.S. Army. When we recorded Mr. Anderson's talk that you're about to see, we were still planning on today being our day of service. Nonetheless, his message today will challenge us all to examine what it means to be an active contributor to a positive community. Here is Kenneth Anderson.
On April 4th, 1968, I was an 11-year-old living on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. That evening, my family had gathered for a meal around the table. It was me, my mother, my father, and my 3 sisters. As we enjoyed our evening meal, over the radio, a very, very terrible piece of news came on. That Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who had been a champion for civil rights, had been assassinated. I can't begin to tell you how, even at that point in my life, I was affected by that news. Because many of us at that time believed that Dr. King and what he represented in terms of his call for nonviolence, his call for community, and his call for service would impact so many people, not just in this nation, but around the world. See, Dr. King had been a champion for justice for so many years, and his loss seemed to end something that so many of us had embraced, had been inspired by, and looked forward so much to having as a part of our journey for liberty and justice and freedom. I take the memory of that awful night to this point today, so many years later, having had the chance to live in a society where we continue to fight for some of those same principles of justice, freedom, and equality. We made a lot of progress in that time, but there's still a lot to do. And at the core of what Dr. King represented, I think, is something that is extremely important, very valuable. As we talk about looking at ways that we can, as a community, grow together, work together, and live together, it is vitally important that we remember something that Dr. King once said. Dr. King said that one of life's most persistent and urgent questions is this question: what are you doing for others? Another well-known person once said this, that service is the price that we pay for living on this planet. In other words, life is really more than just the opportunity that we've been given to amass certain things, such as an education, money, friends, and other resources. The true question and the true value in our humanity comes from answering the question of, having been given those privileges and those opportunities, what does it really matter in the context of those people who are living around us? When we live in a community like Huntsville, which is now the largest city in the state of Alabama, we certainly see all of the wonderful ways in which our city has grown and which so many people in this community have benefited from. But at the same time, that we see that amazing and incredible wealth, opportunity, and growth, we also recognize that every single day, there are people who are fighting the challenge of homelessness. We see people who are confronting things like trying to earn a living wage and earn enough money in order to be able to provide for their families. We see people who are not getting access to education in ways that many of us have been given the benefit of having, and consequently, it creates challenges for them. What Dr. King Jr. represented for us, and when I say us, I'm talking about humanity, as a former winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, as a person who consistently invested in making the community a better place. What I've learned from that, and what we've been given the incredible opportunity to do, is think about how do we make life better for other people, having been given everything that we've been given in order to be able to have a great life. I've benefited from that, and I know many of you have as well. And so that question that Dr. King asked about life's most persistent question, most urgent question about every day when I wake up and I recognize I have the opportunity for life, what am I doing to help somebody else? In fact, there's a famous song that says, if I can help somebody along the way, then my living would not have been in vain. And so every morning I personally challenge myself, not just through my professional career as the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the city, but as a human being, living in a community, working with other people, getting a chance to see firsthand some of the many challenges that we face, even in this community of growth, economic development, and prosperity, the challenges that people face every day. When I talk about organizations in our community, such as Manor House, that has the privilege of feeding people and clothing people, when I think about the Downtown Rescue Mission, Salvation Army, and I think about their efforts to be able to house people who need housing, when I think about some of the after-school programs and some of the mentoring organizations that provide opportunities for young people to have a chance to survive and to thrive, I think about Dr. King's dream that we can live even in this moment, the dream of providing service to others, answering the call to that question of what is life's most persistent and urgent question. The idea that each of us have been given an opportunity to make a difference in somebody's life in very, very basic and simple ways. For me, it begins with an awareness that in spite of everything that I may feel I have or think I am, there are other people who may not be quite as fortunate as me. And it doesn't take actually knowing someone who's in that circumstance. All we need to know is that as we go from day to day, that whatever we may be experiencing, somebody out there is not experiencing life in quite the same way that we are. And so what Dr. King's holiday does every year is gives us a chance to focus on him as the dreamer, the man who on the Washington Monument professed before the world that he had a dream that one day there would be equality among others, that one day people would be able to feel some sense of unity and community among us, that people would see one another as brothers and sisters, regardless of the differences that we sometimes identify in our lives and our experiences. The idea that one day all of us would embrace the challenge of service and making an impact and making a difference in other people's lives. And so on this King holiday, we once again have the opportunity to think about Dr. King's question of what is the most persistent and urgent question that we can answer for our lives? What are we doing every day, every month, every year in service to someone else in our community? Our great community, the Huntsville community, again, the largest city in the state of Alabama, will only be as great as the weakest link in that chain. In other words, wherever suffering exists, wherever challenges and adversity exists, I cannot simply celebrate the success of the city without also reaching back to pull people up with me as well. The idea that I may feel within my heart a desire to help someone is an indication of my compassion for other people and represents one of the core values of what Dr. King said and what Dr. King represented during the time that he was here. And if we all are honest with ourselves, and all of us want to honor the legacy of Dr. King, one of the best ways to honor that legacy is by investing in the community in which we live, finding ways that we can make a difference in other people's lives, finding ways that we can make the community a better place for people to live, finding ways to say that when I am one day no longer around, what have I done? How have I lived my life in such a way that my community is now a better place as a consequence of that? That's the mission that I'm on, through the office that I have, as well as my own personal humanity. And so I celebrate Dr. King's holiday by honoring his legacy, by challenging others and challenging myself to not just be a better person, but as a consequence of being a better person, I can now make the community a better place for all people to live in. You see, in humanity, there really are no bigs and smalls in terms of somebody being better than someone else or somebody being less than someone else. Our humanity is a great equalizer. The fact that we all have, as one very well-known astronomer, Carl Sagan, once said, 99.9% of the same DNA sequences within us. So the reality is that there's so much more within us that is alike than is different. And the fact that that alikeness exists creates a greater challenge and a greater opportunity to invest in the well-being of others. I believe if we do that with intention, if we do that with strategic thought, if we do that with a daily commitment that each day I will be a better person than I was the day before, and that my community will be a better place than it was the day before, I believe that we will have excellence across the spectrum of our community. Meaning that regardless of what part of the community we live in, whether it's North Huntsville, South Huntsville, East Huntsville, West Huntsville, regardless of what school I go to and what education I have or don't have, regardless of what my socioeconomic status is, regardless of what my personal perspective is as it relates to so many things in life, we all, again, have a sense of equality as a consequence of our humanity. What would Dr. King say if he were alive today? I believe Dr. King would say that the journey has been difficult. I believe Dr. King would say that we have had many challenges along that difficult journey. I believe that Dr. King would also say we've celebrated many victories in the process of living over the course of time that we've had over these last 50, 60, 70 years of the modern day civil rights movement. But I believe that Dr. King would also say that there's still a lot of work that has to be done. I believe he would say that because Dr. King would look around and Dr. King would recognize that No one is free until everyone is free. Dr. King would recognize that no one is equal until everyone is equal. Dr. King would recognize that wherever there were challenges and gaps and breakdowns in the opportunity for people to experience the fullness of our humanity, there's work that needs to be done. So whether that's serving food to our community, providing clothing for our community, helping our elderly people, working with people in the disability community, working across the spectrum of race and religion and all other kinds of distinctions that can be made, I believe Dr. King would say that there's tremendous opportunity for us to come together and make a powerful impact in our community. And so I hope that you will join me in making this commitment, not just this year, but every year. And not just this year, but every day. Because every day that we are mindfully working towards making this a better community, we're also making a statement about our desire to be a better version of ourselves. And when we make that regular, ongoing, daily commitment, we recognize that within that context, each of us will be living the dream that Dr. King professed so many years ago. You can assassinate the dreamer, but you can't kill the dream. And in this year, we recognize that Dr. King's dream is still alive and well. And you can be the engine that drives that dream. You can be the ones that continue to carry that legacy forward. You can be the ones that invest in the harvest that is available right here in this community and take advantage of every single opportunity that's available. You see, you don't need to wait till Dr. King's holiday comes to be of service to your community. Every day you're probably sitting next to someone, driving through a community, going to a particular facility where somebody could benefit from what you have to offer them. So I want you to think beyond just this holiday about how you will continue to make an impact and make a difference. You see, your ability to make a difference will go well beyond your educational pursuits. Your ability to make a difference will go well beyond the resources that you may be able to identify. Your ability to make a difference will come from within and will come from your sense of the calling upon your life to make a difference in someone else's life. It's not just about me, it's about everybody around me and how I can engage them in ways to help lift them up as well. I hope you'll join me in that process. And I thank you for giving me this opportunity to share a little bit with you this afternoon about the significance of the King holiday as a national day of service, a national day of opportunity to be involved, and on the local level, how each of us can be an asset to making Huntsville the greatest city on the planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson, for sharing today with our students. As he mentioned in his call to action, the call to service is one that should never be siloed to just one day. So while it's easy for all of us to live in a bubble and think really only of ourselves and those closest to us, I encourage each one of you to find a way to make an impact in our community around us. Several of you I know are actively involved in projects from tutoring to cleaning up parks and trails, all sorts of work. But don't let that work just simply be a box to check or a line to put on a college resume. Pour yourself into that good work. And remember what Dr. Anderson shared with us today from Dr. King, that life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? In other announcements, last week saw us go from fewer than 10 students out for COVID positives and quarantines to over 50 by the week's end. And that's just in the upper school. Our experience has only shown how fast this current variant can spread. Thankfully, we did not have to quarantine many students due to an exposure on campus. I know I sound like a broken record at times, but this is absolutely why we must continue to wear masks during the school day and other school functions such as ball games. And wearing them means actually covering your mouth and nose. Doing so allows us to stay in person in school. It also means that we do not have to quarantine large groups of students when we do have a positive case. The other piece that is critical is that if you don't feel well, don't come to school. Your teachers can work with you to make sure that you get caught up on any missed material. Thankfully, we only had to go virtual for one day with this latest spike. Following these protocols really does give us a much greater chance of not having to return to a virtual learning environment for an extended period of time. Related to the COVID protocols is the news that Mr. Rayford and the SGA shared prior to last weekend that we will not be holding the Hoop Coming Dance or the Blacklight Pep Rally. We'll still have the Hoop Coming game and dress up spirit days, but large gatherings such as these significantly increase the risk for another spike like we saw last week. Planning fake social gatherings to take place of these won't reduce that risk either. Our hope is that this wave in our community is shorter lived, and we're moving forward with our plans for things that we all love coming this semester, such as interim and prom. This is where I have a favor to ask of you. In an effort to really give us the best chance to hold these events that we want, that we all love so much, please do the things outside of school as well that can help us all. This includes not having these fake hoop comings, etc. Outside of last week, we've really had very, very few disruptions this year. We've been able to have our opening convocation and other events along with our kindergarten buddies. We've had pep rallies. We had a homecoming dance. And we've been able to attend concerts and ball games throughout the year. We all can play a part in putting ourselves in the best possible position to hold more of these in the coming months. But it really will take all of us together. Thank you for your time and attention today. Be excellent to each other, and seniors, you're dismissed.